The wind scraped across the frozen Midwest plains like a blade. In the distance, a wagon groaned as it rolled to a stop outside a desolate trading post, its wooden wheels caked with ice and slush. The sky hung low, gray and heavy, threatening, snow again before nightfall. Inside the wagon, 16-year-old Clara Dawson sat huddled in the corner, arms around her knees, chin tucked into her shawl. Her eyes were rimmed red, not just from the bitter cold, but from the quiet crying that had long since frozen into silence. Her dress, once a spring blue, was patched and worn thin in the elbows. The soles of her boots had separated. She hadn't eaten since morning, bread crusts and cold broth. She was used to hunger now, hunger and silence. Outside, her mother's voice cut through the icy wind. "She's barren," the woman said, in a whisper that still carried. "Useless for marriage, but she's strong. She can clean, cook. You'll get your use." Clara flinched, but didn't look up. The man her mother spoke to, a fur-clad trader with a weathered face and cold eyes, spat into the snow. His gaze moved to the wagon. "You sure?" he said. "She hasn't bled since she was 12. We waited. It never came," her mother replied, folding her arms. "God closed that door. We're only asking what's fair." The trader reached into his coat and pulled out a coin pouch. Silver clinked. Clara's father, silent the entire time, extended a calloused hand and took the money without hesitation. His fingers curled around it like a man grabbing his last drink. "Get her down," the mother said, turning away. The tailgate dropped with a thud. Clara didn't move. "Clara," her mother hissed. "Get down!" She stood slowly, her legs stiff from hours in the cold. The trader stepped forward and took her arm. Not harshly, but not gently either. He was used to handling livestock, not girls. Her parents were already mounting the wagon again. Her mother didn't look back. Her father slapped the reins and the horses clopped forward, taking with them what little love Clara once believed she had. She turned her head just slightly, watching them ride off into the gray haze, their silhouettes fading behind flurries of snow. No one spoke. The trader's grip tightened slightly. "Don't cause trouble," he muttered. "Work hard. Keep quiet." Clara stared after the wagon until it vanished completely, and only then did a tear trail down her cheek. Not from sadness. Not anymore. It was something colder, something harder, something beginning. The next morning, Clara's wrists were raw from rope burns. She'd slept in a pile of moldy straw in the corner of the trader's wagon, curled beneath a horse blanket that stank of sweat and animal fur. Her ankles had been chained to a post. At first, she thought it was a mistake, a precaution, but she quickly learned it was just how things were done. She worked before dawn, carried buckets from a frozen creek, chopped vegetables until her fingers bled, scrubbed crusted pots and pans with bare hands while the wind seeped through the barn's wooden planks. She was fed last, always the scraps. Sometimes bones with gristle. Once, just bread soaked in old lard. Her skin grew pale and waxy. She stopped speaking. Not that anyone ever spoke to her. The trader had 3 other girls, all older. One was pregnant. Another had a crooked back. They whispered at night. Rumors of another trade run west. Someone wanted to buy girls for labor. Or worse. Clara stared. At the ceiling in the dark, sleep evading her. The roof creaked. Mice rustled in the hay. On the 5th night, she tried to run. It was past midnight. She'd stolen a key from under the feed bin and crept out barefoot. Snow bit into her feet like knives, but she didn't stop. Not for the cold. Not for the blood on her soles. She made it past the trees, halfway to the frozen creek, before dogs barked. They caught her beneath the moonlight, dragged her screaming through the snow as her nightgown turned crimson around the knees. She was punished, beaten, then chained outside the barn for a night, wrapped in nothing but her rags. The trader said it would teach her discipline. It taught her silence. The next morning, frost rimed her lashes, but Clara didn't cry. Not anymore. The Rockies loomed like jagged teeth behind the horizon as the trader's caravan pulled into the rough and tumble sprawl of a frontier trading post. It smelled of whiskey, smoke, and old blood. Men shuffled past with rifles slung over shoulders. Dogs barked and horses whinnied. A woman screamed somewhere in the distance. No one paid her any mind. Clara stood barefoot on a wooden platform beside two other girls. Her wrists were shackled, face dirty, eyes dull. She was 17 now. The trader barked offers to the crowd. Strong backs, young, quiet, good with chores. But few stopped. Those who did looked Clara over with squinted suspicion. One man lifted her chin and muttered, "Too skinny." Another asked if she could birth children. The trader lied. The buyer left anyway. Hours passed. The sun dropped. Then he appeared, a giant of a man, tall, broad-shouldered, silent as snow. He wore a threadbare coat and carried a worn axe strapped across his back. His beard was thick, his eyes sunken, but there was something steady in them. Not soft, but not cruel either. Thomas Weller. He walked straight to the platform and looked at Clara without touching her. His gaze lingered. She returned it, not in defiance, not in fear, just tired acceptance. "How much?" he asked. The trader looked surprised. "That one? She's damaged, doesn't speak. Don't know if she'll last the winter." Thomas opened a cloth pouch and dropped his last silver pieces onto the table. The trader laughed bitterly. "You sure you want this one?" "She'll do," Thomas said simply. The shackles were unfastened. Clara stepped down, unsure. She waited for the pull, the harsh grip, the angry orders. Instead, Thomas took off his coat and wrapped it around her shoulders. "Come on," he said. "Long way home." She followed. The road twisted deep into the woods, flanked by towering pines that whispered with every gust. Thomas's wagon creaked over frost-cracked trails, his horse trotting steady and slow. Clara sat in the back, huddled beneath the wool coat. It smelled of firewood and pine tar, cleaner than anything she'd known in months. She didn't speak. Neither did he. She kept glancing sideways, waiting for the moment he would turn cruel, when the act would drop and the shouting would begin. But instead, he handed her a mug of warm cider from a tin flask. She clutched it like gold. In the wagon bed, 4 children sat close together, bundled in woolen scarves. They peered at Clara with wide eyes, wary, curious, silent. The oldest, a boy, looked about 12, protective. The girl beside him, 10, maybe, twisted a ribbon between her fingers. 2 younger ones, a boy and a sleepy-eyed girl, leaned against their siblings. Thomas caught her watching them. "My kids," he said. "They don't bite." Clara said nothing. The road narrowed. Trees closed in, arching overhead like a cathedral. The snow deepened. Then, through a clearing, she saw it. A small log house, sturdy and strong, smoke curling from the chimney. A fence wrapped around it like arms. A light glowed from inside. She didn't expect warmth. She didn't expect home. But something inside her, something buried and bruised, ached quietly at the sight. The wagon stopped. Thomas stepped down first, then held out a hand. She hesitated, then took it. Not because she trusted him, but because for the first time in a very long time, no one was forcing her. She walked toward the house. Behind her, the wind finally stopped howling. The attic creaked under Clara's boots as Thomas led her up the narrow stairs, a lantern casting shadows along the worn wooden walls. The house smelled of ash, pine, and something faintly sweet, perhaps honey or dried apples. The attic wasn't much, just an angled roof, a narrow cot stuffed with wool, and a small window covered with frost. But there were no chains, no locks, no threats. "This is yours," Thomas said simply. Clara stood in the doorway, unsure. "It ain't a cell," he added, not unkindly. "You stay as long as you choose to." He set a folded blanket at the foot of the cot and turned to leave. "Chores. Start early. I'll show you." She nodded once, still silent, still unsure of the rules. Over the next few days, she learned them. No lying, no stealing, no shirking. Don't leave the woods alone. Don't waste food. Don't shout unless the wolves are near. But Thomas never raised his voice, never laid a hand on her. His commands were clear, his eyes steady. and slowly she began to move through the house like she belonged there, at least a little. The children watched her from corners and behind half-shut doors. The eldest, Elias, barely spoke but watched her like a sentry. His dark eyes weighed everything. June, with wild curls and sharp wit, asked questions in whispers about Clara's shawl, her boots, her scars. Noah, 7, warmed to her first. He liked her stories about birds and trees. Ruthie, the smallest, stared with wide blue eyes and clung to her older siblings. They didn't call her anything, not yet. But they listened when she spoke. They didn't trust her, but they didn't fear her either. That was a start. Clara was gathering firewood when she first noticed the photograph. It sat on the mantel, behind a faded pine cone garland, sepia-toned, edges curled with time. A woman, young, beautiful, her hair pinned neatly, her eyes serene. She wore a dress finer than any Clara had seen since leaving the town. The woman's hand rested on Thomas's arm. Clara stared, frozen mid-step. The fire popped in the hearth. Shadows danced. She could feel the absence in the room, like the air itself remembered her. Thomas entered with an armful of kindling. He paused, following her gaze. Silence stretched between them, thick as snowfall. "She died 3 winters ago," he said at last. His voice was even. Not cold, not warm, just worn. Fever took her fast. One day she was baking bread. Next day, I was digging through frozen ground. Clara lowered her eyes. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. It was the first thing she'd said since the house. Thomas gave a slight nod. "Me too." He dropped the wood near the hearth, brushing snow from his shoulders. For a moment, his eyes lingered on the photograph. "She was everything good," he murmured, "the kind that made silence feel full." Clara understood grief. Not the loud kind. Not the kind people wailed about in church pews. The quiet kind. The kind that hollowed out your chest and never let you fill it again. She didn't speak. She didn't have to. Sometimes silence was the only kind of kindness that mattered. The wind snapped through the trees as they hit the trail just past dawn. Thomas handed her a small axe and a wool scarf. "We'll cut pine and birch, enough to last the week." Clara followed wordlessly, boots crunching over packed snow, breath hanging in the still air. The forest was a cathedral of frost, trees towering, their branches brittle with ice. Birds were quiet. Even the squirrels had gone still. Thomas worked, with methodical strength, measured swings, clean cuts. He didn't talk much, but Clara didn't mind. She watched, learned the rhythm, then found her own. Her hands blistered fast, but she didn't complain. She didn't want to give him reason to regret taking her in. Around noon, clouds thickened. By 2, the sky turned white. Snow began to fall. Not gentle flurries, but thick curtains that blurred the world. "We need to head back," Thomas said, looking up, but the trail was already gone. Clara turned in a slow circle. Everything was snow, north, south, east, west. Even the trees looked strange now, like ghosts of themselves. "Stay close," he said, his voice low. They trudged through whiteout. The wind rose like a scream, biting through wool and skin. Clara's feet felt like stone. Her fingers barely closed around the axe handle. Thomas stumbled once, caught himself on a tree trunk. "This way," he muttered. But it wasn't. She knew it wasn't. Clara dropped to her knees and scraped away snow until she found moss. "North side," she said, pointing. "Moss only grows on the north. That means east is that way." Thomas stared at her, surprised. "My father taught me," she offered, breath ragged. Before I was sold." He nodded once. No pride, no disbelief, just trust. They shifted course. Still, the snow grew thicker. The sun vanished completely. Night pressed in. "We won't make it," Thomas said. But Clara had already spotted a rise in the distance, dark stone under snow. "There," she said. "Rock face. Could be shelter." It was, a narrow cave mouth, half covered by vines and snow. They crawled inside, cold and damp, but dry. They built a fire from what dry sticks they'd salvaged. Smoke curled up and out through a crack in the ceiling. Thomas leaned against the cave wall, exhausted. Clara sat beside him, wrapping her shawl tighter. "You did good," he said after a long pause. She didn't smile, but for the first time, she felt it. She wasn't a burden. Not tonight. The blizzard raged for another day, but they made it back the next evening, frostbitten, filthy, and alive. The children gasped when they walked through the door. June ran to Thomas. Elias grabbed Clara's coat and helped peel it off. That night, after stew and silence, Clara sat by the fire while the children gathered. She didn't plan to speak. But then Noah asked softly, "Is it true you once rode a horse through a thunderstorm?" She blinked, then nodded. "Was it scary?" Ruthie asked, climbing into her lap without waiting for permission. Clara's arms wrapped around the child like instinct. She looked up. Thomas sat in the corner carving something from wood. His eyes met hers briefly, then returned to the blade. Clara cleared her throat. "Well, the horse was scared," she said. "But I wasn't. They leaned in, even Elias." She told the story, not all of it true, but enough to light their eyes. The thunder, the lightning, the streak of blue across the sky. Ruthie clutched her tighter, and the fire, for the first time, didn't just warm her skin. It reached something deeper, something broken and healing. The door slammed open just before dusk, wind and snow curling through the threshold like a spirit. Clara dropped the bowl she was scrubbing. Thomas staggered inside, blood smeared down one side of his face, shirt torn, his coat hanging by threads. Elias rushed forward, but Thomas lifted a hand. "I'm fine," he muttered. "Just need stitching." Clara caught him as he sank into the chair near the fire. Her hands moved without thought. Hot water, cloth, thread, and needle. His blood was warm, too warm. "What happened?" she asked, voice hushed. "Trappers," he said between clenched teeth. "Caught me south of Split Rock. 3 of them. Said this land don't belong to someone like me. Said they'd be back." He winced as the needle pierced his skin. "They want the pine," he added, "and they don't like that I live without their permission." Clara worked quietly, heart racing. Not just animals, storms, or sickness now. Men, angry men, with greed and guns. She tied off the final stitch, hands trembling slightly. Thomas exhaled, closing his eyes. "Thank you," he said. Clara sat back, breath shallow. For the first time, she realized how fragile their peace truly was. This family, this home, they were all hanging by a thread. She crept out to the barn that night after everyone had gone to sleep. The cold didn't bother her, not as much as the heaviness in her chest. The barn smelled of hay and leather. Moonlight painted silver lines across the rafters. She sank into a corner, arms wrapped around her knees, and cried. Silent, shaking sobs, the kind that come from old places, forgotten wounds. "I'm not worth saving," she whispered to No one. They were right. My own mother said it. Barren, broken, bought like cattle. No future, no place, just borrowed warmth in someone else's house. The door creaked behind her. She froze. Thomas stepped in, lantern in hand, its light soft and gold. He didn't speak, just looked at her, eyes steady. Then, wordlessly, he took something from under his coat and held it out. It was a jacket, well-made, patched, lined with fur, worn soft with time. Clara's breath hitched. It was his wife's. She hesitated, then reached out, held it to her chest like a lifeline. It smelled like pine, bread, safety. Thomas knelt beside her. "You belong here," he said quietly, "if you want to." Then stood and left her in peace. Clara curled into the coat, warmth creeping into her bones. And for the first time, she believed it. Just a little. Snow began to melt in patches. The trees whispered differently in the wind. Spring was coming. Clara was out near the tree line when she saw him, a man standing perfectly still in the shadows, tall, cloaked in rough hide, face painted with ash and earth, eyes dark and unreadable. He didn't speak, just watched her. She backed away slowly, heart thudding. Thomas came from the trail moments later. He saw the man and nodded once, solemn. "Waya," he said. The man stepped forward. "You're far from the hills," Thomas said. The stranger didn't smile, just said, "They're watching, the ones who hurt you." Thomas's jaw tightened. More are coming, greedy, drunk, hungry for land. Waya's gaze flicked to Clara. "She your wife?" Thomas shook his head. "She's family." That word, family, hit Clara like a slow breath. Waya nodded once. "She's strong," he said. "Keep her close." Then, just like that, he turned and disappeared into the trees. Clara stood in stunned silence. Who was this man? Why had Thomas earned his warning? But more than that, why did he trust her? The thaw began in earnest. Streams trickled. The air smelled of soil instead of ice. Clara started a garden behind the house. Nothing big, just carrots, cabbage, maybe some beans. It gave her purpose, rhythm. One morning, June appeared with her sleeves rolled up. "You forgot to till the edge," she said, grinning. Elias showed up next with fishing poles. "I'll teach you," he muttered, almost embarrassed. "You can't keep burning stew forever." Clara laughed, a real laugh. From her belly, even Ruthie planted seeds, dropping them too close together but smiling as she did. At dinner, Clara cooked with onions and herbs she'd dried. Thomas ate in silence but cleared his plate. Twice. Noah asked for seconds and burped, loudly. Everyone groaned. June tied a faded pink ribbon in Clara's hair, giggling. Clara reached up to touch it, surprised by her own smile. Later, Thomas stood on the porch as the stars came out. Clara stepped beside him. "They're good kids," she said softly. "They are," he replied, "and they like you." The night smelled like earth and firewood. "I used to think I was meant to disappear," Clara whispered. Thomas didn't look at her, but he said, "Not anymore." And she believed him, because somehow in this house of pine and ash, she had become something worth keeping. The wind shifted just past midnight. It carried a scent that didn't belong. Smoke, sweat, something foul. Clara jolted awake. She crept to the window, heart in her throat. Torches. 6 men, stumbling from the tree line, eyes wild, guns slung loose. Drunk. Loud. One shouted something about easy pickings. Clara's blood turned to ice. "Thomas," she hissed, running to his room. He was already awake, rifle in hand, jaw set like stone. "Get the children," he said. No fear, just purpose. Clara ran, waking Elias, June, Noah, and Ruthie. "Down to the cellar. Don't speak. Don't cry. Just go." Elias nodded, helping his siblings. June squeezed Clara's hand before vanishing into the dark below. Clara turned to run, then stopped. A figure stood in the shadows near the barn. Tall, still, Waya. He gave her a look, sharp, silent, and melted into the trees. The torches were closer now. Thomas stepped onto the porch, rifle raised. "Turn back," he barked. A man laughed. "Not a chance, old man." Gunfire cracked. Thomas returned fire, steady. Waya struck from the side, a blur of motion, silent, efficient, deadly. 2 bandits went down before the others scattered for cover. Clara ducked behind the door, heart hammering, more. Shots. Then Thomas stumbled. Clara saw the red bloom across his coat. "No!" she screamed. The rifle dropped. Clara caught it mid-fall. She stood in the doorway, shaking. A bandit stepped forward, torch raised. "Out of the way, girl!" Clara aimed, fired. The torch dropped. Another step, another shot. The rest fled into the woods, their screams swallowed by the snow. Clara stood frozen. Smoke rising. Thomas groaned. She dropped the rifle and ran to him, snow crunching beneath her knees. He smiled faintly. "You did good," he whispered, voice cracked, then passed out. The house was quieter than it had ever been. No laughter, no footsteps, just the slow, shallow breathing of a man fighting fever. Clara wiped Thomas's brow again. Wyatt brewed something dark and bitter in a clay pot by the fire. "He'll live," he said, "if he rests." Clara nodded, not trusting herself to speak. She rose early each morning, tending to the livestock, chopping wood, feeding the children, fortifying the windows, teaching Elias how to load the rifle. The land didn't pause for tragedy, so neither could she. At night, Ruthie slept curled beside her. June insisted on brushing Clara's hair. Noah offered her his last sugar cube. "To make tea sweet," he said, wide-eyed. Thomas stirred sometimes, whispered her name. But mostly, he slept. And Clara, barely 17, ran the homestead with a fire she didn't know she had. Spring crept in like a sigh. Soft winds, wet earth, green peeking through snow. The letter came folded in a dirty envelope, delivered by a passing trapper. Clara stared at it for a long time before opening it. Her father's handwriting. "We regret what we did," it read. "Come home. You're forgiven. Forgiven." She read it again, slower this time. "They need you," the letter said. "We made a mistake." Clara folded it carefully, walked outside, and tossed it into the fire. The flames took it quickly. That night, she sat beside Thomas. He was awake now, thin, pale, but watching her with those steady eyes. "They want me back," she said softly. He didn't reply. "I was nothing to them. They threw me away because they thought I was broken." Thomas looked at her, voice gravelly. "You're not broken." She shook her head, tears brimming. "They sold me. But you gave me a place. You let me fail. You let me try. And you never asked me to be anything but alive." He smiled faintly. "You fixed me by loving me anyway." She reached for his hand, held it tight. And for the first time, there was no doubt left. Not in him, not in herself. The earth was soft under her hands. Clara knelt beside Ruthie, pressing seeds into fresh furrows. The garden was twice the size it had been last year. June ran barefoot through the grass. Elias was teaching Noah how to carve a fishing hook, and Thomas, still thin, but strong enough, walked slowly from the house. He knelt beside Clara, breath steady. "Looks good," he said. She smiled. "It will be." He reached for her hand. Rough, calloused, warm. "You're not a guest anymore," he said. She turned, eyes shimmering. "Your family." June threw her arms around Clara's waist. Ruthie giggled, holding tight to her leg. Even Noah and Elias grinned. And in that sunlit field, with dirt under her nails and arms around her shoulders, Clara smiled. Not because she had to, but because, after everything, she finally wanted to. If this story touched your heart, please leave a comment, share your thoughts, and don't forget to like and subscribe. In a world that often casts people aside, stories like Clara's remind us healing starts with love, and family is sometimes the one we choose.